All right, welcome back to another edition of the Forts Athletics Life and Coaching Podcast. I'm your host, Charles Inferna, and I can't believe on the other side of this call, I have multiple-time Highland Games world champion, world record holder, been on the cover of Milo magazine like half a dozen times, Sorinex, gym equipment specialist, Dan McKim. How are you?
Great, man. Thanks for having me. That's quite the intro. I mean, you have to remember, I was on the cover of Milo, but I think they were really short on talent those months. So,
Yeah, those months that you won all those world championships, right?
well, I think it was mostly the eye candy part, honestly. I
Yeah.
mean, me, the kilt, I mean, come on.
Well, I mean, without the beard, I mean, you look like you were like 15 years old, 16 years old, and you're crushing these stones and these hammers and things. But on this end, like I'm like fanning out here. Like I got to be honest. Like if I had my hoop band on right now, my heart rate's like going a million miles. So, but no, so wow, I still can't believe you're here. Dan, why don't you tell us a little bit about how you got involved in sports as a kid, and we'll get started there.
Yeah. I grew up, I'm one of three boys, and so we just grew up doing whatever was in season. So everything from football to, of course, basketball, baseball. We even play a little soccer in the backyard, which come to find out quickly wasn't my sport. Actually, I played 1 year of soccer though. I was in grade school and I played. Bro, we lost every single game. We didn't score a goal all season. And my parents were like, so you want to play soccer next year? I was like, nah, I'm good.
Were you like head and shoulders above everybody else, or what? How old were you when you were playing soccer?
Oh man, I don't know. It was young elementary school. I don't remember. I just remembered my move was to grab the ball with 2 feet and hold it.
Sure.
And then they started kicking it between my legs, and I was like, well, that move didn't work at all. So I didn't know anything about soccer. It was really, really rough.
Right.
But no, I grew up with my brothers, and we just did everything, man. I started loving sports, and then my older brother started throwing in middle school and started watching him in high school. And so I honestly loved to throw. I wanted to throw. Now, 8th grade, 7th and 8th grade went very poorly for me. I didn't hit my growth spurt till like 8th grade. And I almost didn't throw in high school. I almost played baseball. I remember telling my parents, I was like, I didn't like track last year. I think I'm going to play baseball this year. And my dad's like, son, you haven't played baseball since coach pitch.
Right.
I was like, yeah, I might try it out. I don't know. But what happened is, I never forget, and this is part of what coaching is too, right? Is we were sitting after a big track meet in 8th grade. We're sitting in the stadium, and the coach is giving us a breakdown. He says, guys, we might have won this track meet if our throwers actually threw well. And I was like, wait a second. That's me. And so I got singled out. I got called out for not throwing well. And I was like, you know what? Maybe I don't want to throw. Now, I look back and I'm very, very thankful I did.
Right.
But I still remember that to this day, right? I mean, you still got these coaching impacts. That hangs with us.
Right. So you started throwing in middle school. So you said you hit your growth spurt. So how do you remember like how tall you were before you hit this? Because you're what, like 6'4", 6'5" now, right?
Yeah, I was 6'5".
6'5",
Man, I just remember, for some reason, I remember in high school, my sophomore year, I was 6'4", 195.
Wow.
I thought I was huge.
Sure.
I'm like, bro, I'm 195, almost 2 bills. So I remember in 7th grade, I played wing. I would grow up playing a post in basketball.
Sure.
And next thing I know, in 7th grade, I'm playing guard, and I'm like, whoa, what is going on with this? So I didn't hit my growth spurt till 8th grade. I think in 8th grade, I wasn't huge. I was like 6 foot. Being an 8th grader, 6 foot.
Sure.
But yeah, it wasn't until freshman year I was like 6'2", sophomore year 6'4", junior year I was 6'5", and then junior I hit 6'5", 255, and just kind of stayed at that for a long time.
So your football coaches, they were probably like salivating over you, right? I mean, unless you were like the biggest kid in the school.
I pretty much was the biggest kid in the school. So yeah, they were a little upset that I didn't play football in high school. I was, like I said, I was 6'5", 255, but I also didn't want to play line, right? So I went to a small school. I would have been the tackle. And so I was like, man, if I'm going to play, I want to play at least tight end. I want to get the ball.
Right.
In seventh grade, I was still a chunky kid.
Mhm.
And so I tried out for fullback and outside linebacker. Like I wanted to be Lawrence Taylor, coming off the rush edge, you know.
Sure.
I moved real quick. Didn't last long.
Now, did you go to, I mean, did you go to a bigger, like high school, like your community? Like, was it more rural or anything? Like,
Yeah, rural community,
yeah.
town of 10,000 people.
Okay.
So
Yep.
not a small town by any means, you know, but
Sure.
just a small town. So.
Mm-hmm. So when you transitioned to high school and you were throwing, and you know that coach, like, did that coach, like, did he have any other, or she, did they have any other like impact? Like, were they around while you were like on competing in high school also? Like, just because like being in a small school, was it just like one coach from like 7th grade all the way up to 12th grade, or?
No, this guy, that's what's crazy, man. That's weird that we brought that. I haven't talked about this like forever. The fact that coach kind of singled me out in front of everybody and did that to me.
Right.
Man, what was really funny is I never saw him again. I think I was in college, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I'd been throwing better, and I'd gone to college on a college scholarship, and I saw him again. And even to the, you know, I go from being like an 8th grader to now I'm a college student, almost out of college. And at that point, I'd thrown pretty well. I'd set a school record. You know, I was an All-American, D2 All-American, and I thought, well, like, yeah. And I saw him, and I thought to myself, I'm like, yeah, what's up now? You didn't think I was going to be good,
Yeah, right.
you know? But that's just how ridiculous is that. I think of how ridiculous that stupid that is now looking back, but also to remember that kids, I mean, you're a dad too. You think of how much we impact kids and athletes and younger generation by little things we say. Now, I know that that was probably something he said in passing too. He forgot about it 2 minutes later.
Right.
Something that stuck with me for a long time. And I think we forget what a huge impact we have on younger generation, man.
Well, even with my college kids, like I've coached at small Division III schools, like 2,000, 3,000 kids. And I've you know, anybody who wants to throw, sure, come on, you know, you can try, even if you never have in high school, which sometimes it makes it better, especially now where we live up here in Western New York. They introduced the weight in high school like 5 years ago. And you should see, I mean, some of the kids, they throw, you know, like you did, you know, Highland Games style weight, and, you know, they have, you know, leather work gloves, and it's just so interesting, the dynamics. But like, I'll take anybody, like, because you never know, like the best athletes that I've coached, they just showed up. You know, one of them, she was an art major. She's like, oh, I kind of threw the shot in high school, national champion. Another kid, yeah, you know, like I played defensive tackle in high school, but I've never thrown. Okay, national champion. Like, I know those are like very, very like random instances probably, but if you don't give kids a chance, like, you never know how they're going to manifest into their potential, or what they can turn into. But well, it definitely worked out for you. I mean, you went D2 All-American, like, you're crushing it there. When did you realize though, like, that you were good at throwing? Like, was there like a specific like meet, like, especially like in high school, let's say, I mean, because you earned a D2 scholarship, I mean, that's a big deal. Like, was there somebody that was like, hey Dan, you know, like, somebody will pay for you to throw shot put in college?
Man, I don't think it ever really clicked for me that I could throw it until now. I grew up in Maryville, Missouri, which is where I went to school, Northwest Missouri State D2 school. And I remember getting the call from the head coach, who was like, hey, we'd like to have you in for a visit.
Sure.
And I thought, well, shoot, don't tell him, but I was going to go throw here for free. You know, I was just going to walk on.
Right.
And he offered me a small scholarship, and I was just floored. And I thought, wow, this is cool. You mean you really want me to make money? I mean, you really want me to you want to pay me to do this? This is cool.
Right.
And it wasn't until that happened. And the whole point, I guess, and I was kind of miffed, you know, he didn't recruit the local kid at first, but he thought I was going to go to my parents' alma mater the whole time. And I was just like, anyways, it wasn't until that point that I got that call from him that I could get a scholarship doing this. And as I did the math in my head, I stayed at home through college. I lived at home, saved money there, and I got through school without any debt. And it's now that I look back now that I'm so thankful and appreciative of that, because I think to myself how different my life would be probably if I was paying off school debt. And I know not everybody has that opportunity, and I'm very, very thankful for that.
Now, do you think like your college experience was different than like your teammates, for example? I mean, like living for like my wife and I, we were just having this conversation earlier today about, you know, like all the kids in college, like the NCAA pretty much shut everything down, and what college sports might look like, you know, in the future, with maybe more kids deciding to stay home rather than live on campus. But do you think your experience, like, did that help you, do you think, become a better thrower? Or do you know, did it kind of hinder like some of maybe like the social aspects of hanging out with your teammates after meets and practice and stuff like that?
Man, I don't think it hurt. I don't think it hurt me socially at all,
Hmm.
honestly, because man, I was really involved in a lot of campus ministries. So
Hmm.
Monday night I had FCA,
Hmm.
Wednesday night I had church, and then Thursday I had FCA and Campus Crusade for Christ. No, not FCA, Baptist Student Union. I mean, I had like 4 campus ministries I was doing in
Right.
addition to training. And I'm just a gym rat, man. Like one thing
Hmm.
that I've learned all my years of throwing has been I'm not going to be the biggest, I'm not the strongest. I'm most assuredly never the most athletic, but I figure I can outwork people. So
Hmm.
stupidly, I used to train 2.5 hours a day
Right.
and go throw and do sprints, right? In
Hmm.
high school or in college. And I never figured out why I couldn't gain weight. I'm
Right.
like, bro, what is my deal? I'm working my butt off. I'm not gaining weight. Yeah,
Right.
always working.
Yeah. Right.
So I was plenty social there and had a good social aspect there. And I just, it was my mom and I had to have a talk once.
Mhm.
I came home about 3 a.m. hanging out with some buddies. We were
Sure.
playing video games. We weren't doing anything stupid, right? We're just playing video games. And my mom was on the couch waiting for me.
Mhm.
I was like, Mom, what are you doing? She's like,
Mhm.
do you know what time it is? It is 3 a.m. and I've been worried sick about you. And I'm like, Mom, I'm in college. I
Right.
said, if I was away to college, I was in the dorm, you wouldn't even
Right.
know. And so then the next morning, of course, you know how moms are, you know, the
Yeah.
next morning she's like bawling. She's upset. She's like, I'm so sorry. I guess I didn't think it that way. I'm like, Mom, don't. You're making me feel guilty.
Yeah. Right.
I was winning here. Now you're making
Yeah.
me feel
Right.
guilty.
Yeah. Right.
Do this. But
Mhm.
once we had that conversation, it was totally cool. My
Mhm.
parents loved having me at home,
Mhm.
and I loved being there.
So when you were competing in college, what were your expectations like when you showed up on campus? Like, you were going to go there for free anyway, right? So now you have somebody that has offered you a little bit of a scholarship to throw. Like, did it, I don't want to say like raise anxiety, or like, you know, did it make you feel different then? Like, whoa, like I really need to perform at a certain level now because people are counting on me? Or man, if I don't throw the shot 50 feet or 55 feet, they're going to pull my money. Like, was it different then when you realized maybe it's a little bit more serious than when I was in high school?
Man, I think that's where my coach came in really big. My
Mhm.
first 2 years, I had a coach, Shiloh Eaton,
Mhm.
and he taught me to love the sport.
Right.
He was kind of asking me questions like, you know, asking me about Jurgen Schultz, and he's asking me about Werner Gunther, and he's
Mhm.
asking all these questions. I'm like, I don't even know these guys. Virgis
Right.
Alekna, right? And I'm like, I don't
Right.
even know these guys. He's like, you need to be a fan of the sport. And so I used to go to the library. But then we didn't have. I don't know if you're too young. You don't remember the Ring, do you?
I do. Oh, I used to post on that. Well, I'm 38. I just turned 38 in February, so I love the ring.
See, I
Yeah.
like you even better. We're the same age. So this is great.
Perfect.
The Ring. I went into full like fan mode on the Ring, and I used to
Right.
read those. I used to watch all the
Right.
videos,
Yep.
just sit in the library for hours and just watch that. And he taught me. And that's one thing when I work with athletes now is I'll
Mhm.
tell him and I'll ask him like, "Hey, what's Ryan Krauser throwing this year? Hey, what's
Right.
Kovacs throwing?" And like, I don't even know these guys. I'm like, how? I said, but you know about the NBA,
Right.
you know about the NFL, but you don't even know about the sport you're doing. You claim that you
Right.
love.
Right.
So, anyways, you get me. We're getting off on that.
No, that's okay. No, that's perfect. Because I think for the majority of people who are watching this, they're going to be like, "Oh, what's the ring? Like, is that an app or something?" Like, no, you got to go to this website. People used. Well, I remember like Judd Logan used to post all the time, and those were my initial like conversations with him through. I mean, that was our social media, right? Like, I was an
Absolutely.
undergrad from 2000 to 2004, right? So it's like there wasn't, Facebook just started, no
Yeah.
Instagram, no Twitter. Like, you actually had to email somebody or pick up a phone and call them, and then if you were so, you know, fortunate enough to reach out on the ring, somebody might email you back. Like, you had to work for it back then. Like, I
Absolutely.
think we take it for granted now. If I'll just shoot them a DM and hopefully they get back to me. But I mean, fortunately, I mean, thankfully you did, so I appreciate that. But
No. And I think of like YouTube, right?
right,
YouTube wasn't
right,
really
YouTube,
around then
right,
either. So
right,
I was just consuming every video they were
mhm,
posting on the Ring. And I was
right,
like, man, I wish. And you know what that did to me too, man, is two things. When you said
mhm,
that uh, you asked like, did I don't even remember the question now. We're already
It
talking
doesn't.
off.
It doesn't matter. Which
We're already
it
talking off
doesn't.
topic.
It's all
We're
right. Not a
nerding
big
out.
deal. Yeah. Right.
We're nerding out on the ring
Yeah.
already. The I used to consume all those videos, and I really appreciate him doing that because it gave me a love for the sport. And two things happened for me in my career. I didn't feel the pressure of performing for my scholarship because I fell in love with the sport. Like I liked it in high school. We used to grill out on track meets, had a good time and everything, right? But I fell in love with it in college. And two things happened. He taught me how to love it. And then between my freshman and sophomore year, I had hernia surgery and I couldn't train, couldn't lift, for weeks on end. And it just about killed me. At that point, I realized, wow, I didn't realize how much I enjoyed this and how much I miss it. And I don't want to take it for granted again with an injury or something like that. So my sophomore year, I really, really busted it and just hit it hard and fell in love with it. So I was never worried about my scholarship because I wanted to do better and better. And I had dreams, right? Because I fell in love with the sport. I had dreams. I was like, man, I probably won't ever make it to the Olympics, but if I could make it to a USA championship, man, that would be awesome, And so trying to work towards those things. And so I was never nervous about it because I always had a big goal in mind and always was trying to strive further and further.
So did you like that coach that you mentioned? Like, did you like sit down and like have conversations about this stuff, or like after you realized like you fell in love with it and that you really missed it during that summer? What did you like talk about? Trying to throw for the U.S. Outdoor Nationals, or just was simply qualifying for D2? Because back then there was the A and the B standard, right? You remember Raceberry Jam, that website? Like I don't know how many times you hit refresh on that, but
yeah, all the time, man.
Like I was never good. Like I think I made the B one, like my senior year. I was on it maybe for like 2 or 3 days, and then like as people kept like refreshing it, I was bumped off the list. But like did you like have conversations with him about that? And was it like, okay, I want to throw 17 meters in the shot, this is what we need to do to get there? Because you talked about working really hard, but if putting 2.5 hours in every day, if it's not I think you know where I'm going with this, right? Like if you're just going there, you're just going balls out every day, like eventually you kind of like burn out, right? Like or was it different for you? I don't know. Like I'm not 6'5", so I couldn't have handled half the stuff that you did back then, right? I'm barely 6'1", so like my body's not built for that. But
you're way more handsome, so that's good.
Well, it's because I don't have any gray hair here, and I'm surprised you don't either. Like you have more kids than I do. Like what happened? Like I missed the boat.
Don't look too close, and then don't look at the top of my head, man. I'm telling you, it's.
At least you got it. At least you got it. I know. My kids are like, "Oh man, Daddy, we're gonna look like you like someday with no hair." I'm like, I don't know, guys. Probably. I'm sorry.
Yep.
Yeah. Right. But.
Yeah, we talked about it. Yeah, that was one of those things. Okay, so at the time, where did you throw at?
I threw at Fredonia State. So it's a really small D3 school, sandwiched between Buffalo, New York, and Erie, PA.
Okay. So you had all those Wisconsin throwing schools that were just
juggernauts.
Up in D3.
Yeah, they were. I mean, I never met anybody. Actually, the first year that I was coaching after I graduated from college, I was a GA. I was coaching my former teammates, and we were fortunate enough. We went to Waverly, Iowa in 2005 for D3 Outdoor Nationals. And I'll never forget it. The Wisconsin Oshkosh coach approached me, and he's like, "Hey, you coach at Fredonia?" And I was like, "I do." He's like, "Do you remember this Trevor guy?" And I was like, "Trevor Hitchcock?" I go, "Yeah." He goes, "Yeah." He goes, "I used to beat up on my kids back in the 90s." And this, like, I was like, "Oh yeah, he was the national champion." He's like, "Yeah, he used to beat our kids for like 3 years in a row." And I just thought that was so cool that like this coach, he probably like hated me on the spot, like, "Oh my gosh, like this Fredonia team they're like back again." But no, I mean, we would have got crushed. Like I wasn't a very good D3 thrower. Like I was marginal at best. So I never had the pleasure of competing with the Wisconsin schools. Did you? I mean, you were kind of close, right? I mean, you were closer.
Right. I didn't really ever compete against those guys. I just knew them because, like you, man, I was hitting that refresh on the list all the time, and so then I was always comparing our list versus D1 versus D3, and then how this and that, and then some D3 guy would throw a big number. I'm like, doggone, man, he's you know, there was a couple like hammer marks. I think I'm like, well, he would win D2 too,
Yeah,
you know,
that's right.
and looked like he'd be all American at D1. Wow, that guy's a stud.
Right.
So I always pay attention to that stuff, man. I didn't, dude. This is what was bad about me, mostly my sophomore year. So I loved my coach. Shiloh was awesome, and honestly, I wish I could have thrown with him for 4 years because I think maybe, but you know what? You look back and you wonder how God has worked things out, and maybe I never would have gone on the Highland Games because of track would have been too big and too focused for me. But he, I didn't think his workouts were hard enough, right? So I'm the secret. I would go do I would do my workout before, which was like 2 hours. I would train my workout for 2 hours.
Sure.
And I already be in the weight room waiting for him. He's like, "Oh, you're here early?" I was like, "Yeah, just getting ready, coach."
Yeah, right.
What we got today? And then I would do his workout, which was about an hour. And I was like, okay, 3 hours training. And then we'd go throw for 2 hours. And then we might have 30 minutes to an hour of sprint and conditioning, you know?
Right.
And only by the grace of God did I not have some devastating injury where I couldn't, because I look back now and I think that was just really dumb. Like I had no concept. And so for me, it's always been more is better. So clearly, if I work harder, I lift more weights and I spend more time doing it, it's better. And it wasn't until really I got probably 4 or 5 years of my Highland Games career that I started to kind of click and understand that, like, hey, bro, maybe you should just chill out for a little bit and realize more is not always better.
Right. So how were you first introduced to Highland Games? Like, was it just somebody, you know, at college was like, hey, Dan, you should go try and throw these stones in the field. Like, you're a good shot putter. Maybe it'll work out for you. Like,
Yeah.
how'd it go?
I was staying up late one night in college, I'm sure, studying meticulously.
Of course.
For a really, really hard communications degree. I mean, those are tough. So
you said it, not me.
I know better than that.
No, right. Right up.
And I got ESPN2 used to cover the Scottish Highland Games.
That's right. I remember.
And so I was watching and I was like, doggone, that looks really fun. The throwing heavy stuff. They get to wear a kilt.
Yeah.
Man, I think I'm going to try that. And I realized by my junior, senior year, I was like, okay, Olympics are definitely not my future. USA outdoor shot put, not going to be my future either. But I love to throw. I love to train. I got to find something. And so my wife and I got married and moved down to Kansas City. And I called up a guy, right? Again, before social media and all that. And so I called up a guy. I was like, hey, man, saw your name. I really want to throw. And he's like, cool, we'll show up. And I was like, well, no, it's competition. Like, what do I need to do? What things do I need to be practiced? He's like, just don't worry about it, just show up. So I showed up in a sleeveless shirt and t-shirt or shorts and started throwing, man. And I absolutely fell in love with it. And just got immersed in the sport, man.
So what year was that, if you don't mind me asking? Like when your first?
That was 04. So I threw my first one in July of 04.
So you just graduated from college in May, and you were competing in a couple months later.
Yeah, I was competing a couple months later. That's what's weird, man. Right. So I retired in 2017. Not to get ahead of us here, but 2017, and my wife and I are talking, and I said, "You've never known me as a non-thrower. Like, you know, our marriage has never not included the Scottish Highland Games."
Right.
So it was definitely a transition. But yeah, within a couple of weeks, I was down there. And the same way the ring was, throwing Highland Games has NASGO Web, which is North American Scottish Games. And that was, dude, I remember at work just being like working and then click and refresh. And especially if somebody started talking about drugs or speaking in the weight for height or something, it was like this big discussion. And so you're just constantly checking, refresh. And they had a database. You had to always check and see how you were ranked and everything. It was awesome.
So what do you remember from that first, like, so you showed up at this guy's place, right? He's like, this is a light hammer. Here's a caber. Here's a weight for height. I mean, you're 6'5". Like, you know, I think sometimes people take it for granted. Like up here in Rochester, there's a couple guys that throw and they're like, oh yeah, you should come out and do it. I'm like, listen, I'm like 38. Like I've never done it before. If I was 22, sure, man. Like you do whatever. You're dumb most of the time or sometimes. But, so you just show up, like, what were your what were you thinking when were you like, oh man, this is gonna be like ESPN, like there's gonna be people watching, there's gonna be a lot of, you know, beer or whatever, like.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I think because it wasn't a full Scottish festival. It was more like a I think they call it an ethnic festival.
Okay.
It was weird. You're hearing bagpipes over here, and then you're seeing Indian music dancers over here. You've got some Viking people over there. I mean, it was everything,
Sure.
which was kind of strange now that I think about it. But no, they showed me how to throw, and I watched, and I jumped in and did it, and I got humbled really quick by the caber because it was such a weird thing. And man, and that's the biggest advice I always give people when they want to talk about, I think I want to throw in the Highland Games. What do I need to do? And I was like, just go sign up and do it. Don't overthink it. Don't think you need to get every implement, because you may decide you're not going to like it. But the big thing is you just get out there and try it, and you're going to love it, and the people are great, and it's going to be a good time.
So you do your first meet in July. You said you're just newlywed, right, with your wife. So when in that, like I asked you with high school throwing. So in the Highland Games, so how long did it take before you were kind of like my scores are pretty good. Like I'm winning these D or C meets. Like somebody's explained it to me before. Like you have your top level, and then kind of going down the And you made a great video about it that one time. Which, So like when was it like, I could, I might be able to compete at, a bigger level here?
Yeah, that's a good question, because there was a lot of milestones in my Highland Games career, and one of them was that, because when I went to that first kind of demonstration competition, I threw decent at a couple events, right? Stuff that more or less related to track, the stone throw, and then the lightweight for distance, which was kind of a discus, right? And of course the hammer. And I remember hitting it, and they're like, "Hey, dude, you did pretty good." And I was like, "Bro, I finished third, and there's only 3 of us in this division, or whatever." But we're pretty good for the area. And I was okay. And I was like, so next competition, I mean, we got A, B, and C. So I should probably start out at C. They're like, no, you need to go to the A class. I'm like, man. So I went to the A class and jumped in and started climbing the ranks a little bit. But it wasn't until 2007. 2006, actually, I went out to USA Nationals as a amateur nationals. I think I finished 4th or 5th.
Okay.
And some guys were like, dude, you're young. You've got a good career in the sport. And I was like, yeah, whatever. It's kind of fun still. And then 2007, I was the #1 ranked amateur in the world. And people were like, hey, we think you should make the jump to pro, and they're going to pay. I was like, get out of here. You're not going to pay me to throw. That never happens. And I remember telling my wife, I was like, babe, look, you're going to pay me to throw. She's like, really? And I was like, yeah, they say I'm good enough. So it was 2007, and it took other people saying it that you can do it. I remember being so nervous. Like, man, once I make the jump to pro, I can't go back to amateurs for like 5 years. But what am I going to do? And they're like, well, how else are you testing yourself? You just need to do it. And that was 2007, and I jumped in, man. I got invited to Invitational out in Pleasanton, California. And I won the caber toss and won the challenge caber, and that was kind of my signature event. And I always tell people, it's like, you want a guaranteed way to get invited back by an athletic director, is turn the caber. Well, what do you mean? It's hard. I was like, right. It is the most crowd watched, the most fan favorite thing. Like, I think at that I finished 3rd or 4th at that my first pro competition, and I bombed in a couple events, like last place by a long mile in the heavyweight for distance and the lightweight for distance. But yet I won the challenge caber toss, and the crowd was big, and they're watching it. I'm taking pictures with people. I'm like, what reality am I in? I'm a thrower and taking pictures with people, and like, I didn't even win, but they don't even know, I was just throwing the caber. So that was when I finally kind of realized, like, hey, I think I can maybe do this for a little bit.
So does that, I mean, you're a real humble guy. I mean, like, your parody videos, they're like, I mean, I love them to death. Like, even my kids, like my oldest is like, he's kind of like starting to figure this stuff out. But you're taking pictures with people, and you were asked to, like, you're throwing stone, like, like Matt Vincent, he always posts, dude, like, I threw stones in the field, man, and like people watch. But like, you're starting to make a living out of this, right? Like, like in your mind, like, what do you like you just mentioned, well, hey, honey, they're going to pay me to come throw. Like, what goes through your mind now you're starting to build momentum, right? You haven't, I don't think up until this point, you haven't competed in the world championships yet, right?
No.
So talk a little bit about that then, like, because you have a job, right? Like you have kids. Like,
Yeah.
how are you managing all this?
Yeah, I mean, I got a full-time job at that
Yeah.
point. I'm starting, and that was the hard part, man, is just trying to get my name out there, right? I'm
Mhm,
from Missouri.
mhm,
I was traveling regional and doing amateur competitions. And now as a pro, you got to try and hit the circuit, right? And get invited to all these competitions.
right.
And it was a hard balance, man. But like I said earlier, I think in all that God's blessed me to accomplish in the sport, I've never, I was always encouraged by Ryan Vieira. To me,
Mhm,
he is next to Bill Anderson. He's the greatest of all time. He's won
mhm,
5 world championships, 11 U.S. championships. He virtually had every world record before he retired. Many of
right,
them they've already been broken by other people.
right.
But that dude wore down. He went through 2 VCRs. Okay, so back in the day, for those of you listening that don't know,
That's
we
right.
had these things called VCRs. They were
Right.
cassette tape players, right?
Mhm,
Video cassette players, and he wore 2 of them out just from rewinding, going over film. And I remember thinking, I'm like, wow, am I at that level? If I want to proceed and progress in the sport, am I at that level to where I would break a VCR? And I'm like, no, I'm not.
mhm,
And so that's where I started to really challenge myself. And that's what was hard, man, is that I just remember those days getting up at 4:15, 4:30 in the morning. I'd go train, and then I'd drive an hour into work.
mhm,
And then I would sit in my butt all day in a cube doing work. And then I would drive home and I would go have dinner real quick. And then I'd go out and I'd throw for an hour and a half, 2 hours a night. And I
mhm,
did that
mhm.
probably 4 nights, 3 nights during the week, and then twice on the weekend. And I was just grinding, doing it. And yeah, it was tough. I had 1 kid at that time and then kept growing kids from there too.
Right.
So
Right.
it was I wouldn't say I wouldn't say it was always a healthy obsession. I'll be
Mhm.
honest with my
Sure.
throwing,
Mhm.
but and that's partly why I retired when I did, is to spend more time at home. But yeah, it was an interesting journey, man.
Well, I think Dan, like I think people take that's the part that they take for granted. Like I coached a kid at NAS. He was a D2 national champion in the weight throw, and I was kind of like, all right, like this is it. Like you got to make a decision. Like I think I got you to where you can be as far as I can get you. You should go talk to Judd. Go train at Ashland, and if you really want to pursue the Olympics, do it. And we were talking about like stuff similar to this, and I'm like, well, what do you reflecting back now? And he's like, man, he's like, you just gotta fucking want to do it. Like he's like, I think people on social media, they think it's easy, but
Yeah,
he's like, nobody knows about getting up at 4 o'clock and doing all this stuff. And that's why I find, like, people like you, it's so intriguing. Like you're a world champion, but you got a job, right? You have other responsibilities. It's almost like throwing it was a hobby that turned into something bigger. I mean, did you think you were ever like, I know we joked about like the Milo and things like that, but did you ever think it was going to get to that point? Like you were just going to light the world on fire?
no, man. When I first started, it was all for fun, right? It was
Right.
just a fun thing. And then when I turned pro, I remember my goal was like, man, I don't think it'll ever happen, but if I could just go to USA Nationals
Right.
sometime, that would be awesome. The Celtic Classic would be incredible. I remember just thinking if I could ever make it there.
Right.
And that's why I think it's always been for me, is to remember, like, that's only by the grace of God. I am not, I think of the guys I've thrown against, the
Right.
Olympic trials guys, the NFL
Yeah,
football
right.
players guys. And I'm like,
Right.
I don't belong here, but I'm going to keep
Right.
trying like I do.
Right.
And that's what I think irritates, man. I'll be honest. It's rubbed me wrong through the years sometimes when somebody will say, hey bro, can you look at a video of me throwing the weight for distance? And I say, you bet, no problem. What you got? They send it to me. I say, hey, let's work on your entry here. Your
Mhm.
cast is a little high. Let's work on a lower entry and
Right.
get that going. A week later, cool, I got it. What's next? And I was like, no, you don't got it. And I'm sure you see this all the time with your
Yeah.
athletes and
Yeah.
coaching, right? But
Yeah.
I'm going, no, you ain't got it. And like, well, I think by next year I'll probably break the world record in the weight for distance. And I was like, yeah, you probably won't. So I think we're done,
Right.
And so
Right.
I think that's what's hard is you're exactly right. People see
Yeah.
like, oh, it's just easy. No, it's not. It's the hours and hours and the thousands of throws.
Right.
And so, and I always say, like, you don't got it yet. You
Right.
keep working that. Come back to me in about 3 months. Then we'll do
Right.
the next thing.
Right. So did you have somebody like that, Dan? Like you went to your amateur, you were the number one ranked amateur in the world. You have people maybe talking in your ear, like you got to go pro and you have to do this. But like who do world champions go to? Like who do you bounce ideas off of in regards to should I make this transition? Like how many competitions should I do in 2008? Like who do people of like your stature talk to when it comes to advice about stuff?
My,
Well, it's well,
uh,
but like, real,
yeah,
like for me, it's like we're having this conversation, and I like I said, I can never thank you enough for that. But maybe, but like 10 years ago, it might have been more difficult to have a conversation like this, or maybe you get on the phone with Ryan and say, hey, listen, like, what do you think? Like, so who were people that were kind of helping you out, along the way to help you make the best decisions for yourself in regards to making the jump to pro?
yeah, man, that was Sean Betts. Sean was the 2008 world champion. He's from Omaha, Nebraska,
Mm-hmm.
and he was at that very first competition I was at. I remember just watching him just completely soar weights and stones and hammers out there, and I thought, holy cow, this guy. And Sean at the time was like, hey man, you're going to be moving up this real quick. And I was like, yeah, whatever, man, I'm just starting out. But I stayed close friends with him for all these years, and he was the one that I always went to counsel wise, right?
Right.
And he's like, hey man, you need to make the jump now. And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not ready. I won't be able to get into games. And he's like, I'll help you. And
Right.
he did. And I've always remembered that. And I've always tried to help guys that because I know Sean didn't do that with everybody, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I'm very thankful and blessed that he saw in me somebody who was willing to work hard,
Mm-hmm.
someone who was willing to not make a mockery of the sport,
Right.
and someone who respected the sport. And so he was willing to help me. And so
Mm-hmm.
ever since then, I've always tried to pass it forward. And if I find a young guy, an amateur, I think, hey, he respects the sport. He works hard. I'm going to help him out, and I'll try to help him out where I can. But he was the one, I almost, honestly, dude, I almost retired from the Highland Games in 08, 09, 08, because I messed up my back
Mm-hmm.
and I was just wrestling with it. And I remember telling Sean, I was like, man, I may be done, man. Like I can barely walk. My back is just killing me.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, don't give up yet. You can do this.
Mm-hmm.
You can rehab this. You can make this happen. You just take the rest of the year off. You can come back. You can do this. And at that point, I was like, man, I can't make it to these other competitions. How am I going to get into ones in the future? He's like, I'll help you. You're going to be okay.
Mm-hmm.
So
Right.
he's a huge influence on my throwing career, man.
Mm-hmm. So I think you just said it. Like, I think too, another piece that people like fail to see is like, you have to, when you have the opportunity, you have to take advantage of it. Right. Like you had the world champion that you're able to communicate with at the time.
Yeah.
And he's encouraging you. I mean, you could have easily said, yeah, you know what, my back hurts. We have, 3 kids or whatever, like job's too difficult. I'm going to let it go. But I mean, shortly after that, it's when really, your career kind of started to take off. Right.
Yeah, man, that's when it really things started going better. Like I came back from the injury, and I just missed out nationals the year before, so 2010. And honestly, man, that's when the weight gain happened too, right?
Right.
So
Mm-hmm.
I remember my first competition. I was 6'5", 255, and I thought, boy, I'm a big strapping guy from D2 college. I'm gonna be ready.
Yeah.
And I looked around, I was like, boy, these guys are all 280 to 320.
Right.
What in the world? So about 2009, I started climbing up the weight gain, and I said, I've got to really, if I want to throw well in this, I've really got to up my weight, my size. And so that's when things started clicking in 9.
Mm-hmm.
And then 2010, I went to USA's and finished. No, that was 2009. Sorry, I went to USA's and I finished 4th, just off the podium. In 2010, I won it and got my invite to the first Worlds.
Mm-hmm. So you've been able to travel the world with Highland Games. So when you won U.S. Nationals after finishing 4th the year before, what did you change? Not so much like how many caber tosses or weight for distance like throws you took. Like, was there anything like mentally that you changed? Like, was there is that the time where you started to kind of smarten up and think, you know what, I don't need to take, my volume's too high. I need to like smarten up and just, visualize things? Or like, was there like, what was the change? I mean, going from 4th to winning, I mean, that's kind of a big deal. I mean, your competitors, I mean, they were similar guys. So like
Yeah.
what changed for you over the course of that 12 months?
Man, it was, I would say it was 2009,
Hmm.
Portland, Oregon, pro competition in July, right?
Hmm.
Leading up to nationals. I think I was like going into nationals, seated like 8th or 9th,
Hmm.
right? I kind of squeaked in the top 10, was able to put together a good weekend and finish 4th, right?
Hmm.
So, but honestly, man, Portland, Oregon, I remember because I always threw well in the stones. I usually at that time I would win. I could win both stones,
Hmm.
and then the weights for distance, I would finish last.
Hmm.
And then I would come back in the hammers and throw decent. I might win the caber, win the weight over bar. I remember just thinking to myself, I was like, I was going into those events that weren't very good. I was defeated already.
Hmm.
And I would just go, okay, well, here's my bad event. Looks like I better take my lumps. And I
Right.
wouldn't even. And so I remember coming back from that competition. I think I finished 6th overall. And
Hmm.
I said to myself, I remember flying back and I think I had a layover in Phoenix. I remember sitting in the waiting area going, never again. Never, I'm not gonna let this happen anymore. And what that meant for me was that I wasn't gonna go into competition just trying not to lose. I had to
Right.
compete to win every single time.
Right.
And so many times we compete not to lose
Hmm.
instead of competing to win. And so the big change for me was just the mentality of it.
Right.
So you could look at the numbers and say McKim is not gonna win the weight for distance, but even just that mentality of it, man, where I go, okay, I might win this. I'm gonna put a big
Right.
throw out there, and
Right.
slowly, and dude, just like every competition from there, every weekend there, my weight started to improve,
Hmm.
which meant my overall points started to improve. I
Right.
just started hitting higher numbers just because I had confidence and
Hmm.
I had an understanding of going and getting after it.
Hmm. So when you won that national championship the year after, and then you qualify for worlds, what, like, was that like a, like, oh my gosh, like I actually, like I did it, like this year of hard work, really paid off with these weights, and now you're gonna compete at the world championships. Like what, how does the mindset change then? Or is it just like, hey, this is fun, like we're gonna let it ride and see what happens this first time?
Yeah. Oh man, there was a lot of self inflicted pressure, I guess you could say. There's
Hmm.
some, but um, I was honestly just enjoying it. And
Hmm.
man, I don't know if I feel like I hate to, it's a cliche, but
Sure.
I throw with a chip on your shoulder, right?
Hmm.
And so I don't know that I've always thrown that way. I think I've thrown with the understanding that I don't belong here because I will sit in competition even after winning nationals and going on to winning worlds and going, holy cow, I don't belong here.
Hmm.
I am not near as good as any of these guys athletically. So let's just go mess it up. Let's see what we
Hmm.
can do. And so I think that's kind of how I've always had my approach is that because I don't know, man. I feel like kind of society in sports in general, if you ever feel like you've arrived, then it's probably time for you to leave,
Sure.
right? So because at least for me,
Hmm.
if I'm going to stay humble, if I'm going to stay hungry, I've got to throw and compete like I'm going to lose, and so I've got to keep going to win. So I think it just fueled me in 2011 to just try and win the world championship.
So did that ever get I want to word this like as best I can, like did it ever get like boring? Like were you ever, you won nationals, you go to worlds, like now you're world champion, like when you fly home, are you like, okay, like I did what I wanted to do? Or like, because I was talking to somebody else about it the other day, right? Like, the cliche, the wolf climbing the mountain is always hungrier than the one on top. But you were there for a long time, so like do you ever get like, okay, like I could take my foot off the gas a little bit, like I can just chill, and then, or like how does that work then? Like does anything change? Like, I mean, your kids are like, oh, dad's here now, like that,
Yeah.
do they realize like what happened?
Oh man, so many good questions in there.
Sorry,
So
I
many
know I
things you
so I
could go.
get rattled.
No,
It's
no, I'm just saying like that's
yeah,
good stuff, man.
yeah.
So I got a couple things on that.
Sure.
2012, the year following,
Mhm.
I talked about Portland, how you compete. So what I did is I was a big numbers guy. I used to mow the yard, and
Mhm.
the big competition that year, it'd be 6, 7 months, 9 months away, but I would plan out like, okay, So if Vlad and Scott beat me in the stones, but then I pick up 2 points on them in the hammer, and I would,
Right.
every single scenario I'd go through in my mind, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I went through the whole scenario 2012. Worlds was in Fergus, Canada, and Fergus, Ontario, I think.
Yep.
It's Canada, right?
Canada.
And I remember going, okay, if I just have an average games, if I just throw my average numbers, I'm going to win.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went and I threw average and finished third. And I remember going back to the little dorm room they had us in that night and going, man, again, like Portland, you idiot. You've competed. You didn't compete to win. You competed not to lose. And so what happened? You lost. You finished third. Your goal was to repeat, and that's not what you got. So 2013 on, I always threw that way. And again, it kind of in 2014 at Worlds, I fouled a big throw in the stone and a big throw in the lightweight for distance that would have won me. I lost that Worlds by 1 point. I would have won had maybe I done a safety throw, right?
Sure.
But I threw to win and not to not lose. So I will say, man, I'm going to say this like, I don't want to sound like a jerk. Winning the second, third, and fourth world championship is harder than winning the first.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Like, I don't want you to take that like it's like, oh, what was me? I won a world championship. I don't mean it like that. What I mean is that first one, you're kind of right. Like, you're hungry. Like, I was the guy, I was the upcoming guy, and I had a lot to prove. I want to win it. And then when you're expected to win, then it's hard. So I won in 2011, finished third in 2012. I won it in 13, finished second in 2014. I won it in 15, and I was second in 16, and then I won it in 17, right? So like this back and forth, just like, Matt Vincent won 2 there, and then Scott Ryder won the other one in Scotland. And so it was one of those things, man, where being the repeat guys, it's hard because everyone's coming for you. And so it wasn't that I didn't train hard, I didn't try hard, I didn't want it. I wanted it really bad, but man, it is, and the pressure, I don't know. I don't know, man.
Well, I'm just like because it's really because you and Matt really you traded for that 5 years. You won, he won, you won, he won, right?
Yeah.
Like how do you learn how to compete like that? Like because we're the same age, so like for someone who who's big time high school thrower or someone who's big time collegiate D1 All-American stuff like this, like how do you teach? How would you teach them to not be afraid to lose, I guess, right? Like I work with D3 kids and 99% of the kids, they come and they just want to be part of the team. And, if I have a guy that throws a shot like 45 feet, like that's a win for us. Right. So it was always, and I still find it very difficult to have those types of conversations of like, it's okay to fail. Like you don't have to go for the safety stuff. Right. But like at your level, like at that elite level, like status, like is it just as easy as somebody to say, Dan, get over yourself. Like you're the champion. You're just going to go on and you're going to steamroll people. Like there's stuff that goes on between the ears at that level too, though. Right. I mean, like you fly overseas and, is there ever like in your mind, like, holy cow, like I'm going for the repeat or I'm going to try and do this, or damn, that Vincent guy is going to show up again. Like, why doesn't he just leave me alone? Like leave me alone. Like I'm just trying to get into like, because that facet just it interests me so much. And I think a lot of other people might be interested too. And just like how, how do you think about that?
Yeah, man, that's a good question. That's another hot topic of mine because it honestly transformed my throwing career, and I think lengthened it because when I was in college, I went to 6 national championships, indoor and outdoor, right? And shot, disc, hammer, and weight, various years. Every year I was seeded. Every single time I was seeded to be an All-American, and I came away with an All-American once on an 8th place finish indoor, right? I choke artist, bro. Like I would choke every big competition, right? I would throw really well at conference. I set myself up to peak, and then I get to nationals, and then I would choke. And so one thing I did, and it's something that I always encourage every single thrower, every single athlete, every single Highland Games to track that I talk to, is I created ghost throwers. So every time I would go out to practice, right? So I would set the stage. I would do my warm up. Now, granted, early in the season, maybe if I'm not doing full throws yet, I'm just doing technique and such.
Sure.
I may not. But soon as I hit full throws, man, and I was hitting into the season, I was throwing against ghost throwers every day. So I might, in the lightweight for distance, I might say, okay, I've got 4 throws left, and Mike Pekoski's thrown 82-6, and whoever, Scott Ryder went 84, or Matt Vincent went 85. And so I would say, I've got to throw 86, nothing about it. So I would enter the box like I was throwing, and I had that mindset, and I would treat it like a competition throw. Don't foul it. Don't you dare foul it. That's the other thing. We don't foul in the competition. We shouldn't foul in practice all the time. And that just drives me crazy too. But anyways, so I told myself, okay, I've done this. And so when I got to that first competition, like nationals, when I won my first national championship, it came down to last throw. And Eric Fisher, a good buddy of mine, fouled on his last throw. They would have won his national championship, right? But I won it. But it took those 3 throws I had before to hit that mark, right? And so I always tell people is create those ghost throwers, because I knew when I came to those situations, man, because I know, man, stuff that I never would have been able to do in college. I was trying to think on the 2015 World Championships in France, came down the last throw on the weight over bar, and I cleared it on my last throw to win the World Championships. I have multiple championships where it came down the last throw, but I had drilled that every day in practice. And so I was never, granted you have butterflies, but I was never terrified and choked like I did in college, because I had done it probably thousands of times. And so that's why I always tell people, whether you're in Highland Games or in track, create ghost throwers, because you've got those situations. Because you're right, you may have everything, but you ain't got it up here, you're in trouble, and it's going to come back and bite you.
So how many, just out of curiosity, those ghost throwers ever beat you, or no? We'll keep that maybe on the down low.
Yeah, they beat me.
Yeah,
they would beat me, but that's part of my too of man. If it got too easy, you got to set your numbers up. You can't be like, oh, the ghost thrower threw 72, and you're usually like an 8-foot thrower. Like, well, come on. But there's times, and I would set that too, as I had to be better about, perhaps like we talked about, that I was in college. I would say, okay, I have 6 throws, and that's it. I have to throw 4 of these over 84. And sometimes I would punish myself if I didn't. Right, I would set myself up like for punishments if I didn't. But a lot of times it was like, no matter what, you've got to hit these throws to win the championship. It's the championship at the field, but it's the championship this round, even though it's the field of the school that you're practicing that day. But to win the championship, you have to do that. And there were many times where I didn't do it. I only threw 83 for 3 of those throws and 81 for the other ones. Guess what? It's time to go home. You lost today. Figure it out. Go over the video, go over it in your head, and then next practice, you're going to win it this time.
I'm so appreciative that you shared that, because and I've said it a million times. Like, I think people take it for granted, but with social media, like, and everyone, not everyone, but people post like their wins. Like, a lot of people don't post their losses, or I missed this deadlift or this squat or this bench. It's always like the highlights. And I think that's really important, because you won that world championship in 2015, probably 100 times on that field before you even showed up. Right. Like, and I think that's where, even like kids that I coach now, it's like, oh, coach, that's no big deal. Like, we'll get there. I'm like, no, like, it takes like years. Like, it's not like instantaneous. You're going to get 100 likes and you're amazing all of a sudden. Like, it takes a long time. And I researched that for a living, and it's like, oh my gosh, like, if I wish I would have understood that, I probably would have thrown a little better when I was in college. Like, it just takes time, but it's difficult to tell a 19-year-old, hey, you just got to be patient, because patience, like 10 minutes, like, you see those 3 dots when you're text messaging someone, like, oh my God, are they going to write back immediately? Like, and you're an adult and you're doing this, like, well, right. Like, that's why I think it's so cool. I think that's why, we're handing off so much here, like, because I do that in the garage too. Like, when I'm, before, when I was like competing in powerlifting, like, okay, like, I have to hit this, like, I got pins here, like, I'll be okay if I miss it, but like, you have to try. Cause if you don't have it there, like in your garage or the field that you're training at, how can we expect to do it when it really counts? Like, when there's a tape measure and there's 5 other dudes that throw just as far, if not farther.
Absolutely, man. That's something I wish I'm with you, man. I wish I'd have known that in college. That would have helped me a lot. I wish I'd have set the stage in college, and that's something I want to teach my kids, as they throw, of setting the stage and creating. But I don't know why I didn't click, man, because I played basketball in high school and we did situations, right?
Right.
Coach would be like, set the clock, minute, you got 90 seconds.
Right.
We got to score 5 buckets, or whatever this. And so you create those scenarios. And for some reason, I think we forget that, at least in my realm, we forget that as throwers. We have to create the scenarios.
Right. So I mean, you couldn't have written a better scenario for 2017, right? Like I was reading that Milo this morning. Like when you showed up, like like in the interview there, like you knew that this was the last time.
Yeah.
What did that mean to you? I mean, because you talk about a point here and a point there. I mean, really, you're talking about it's inches, right? Like, I mean, it's any given Sunday, pretty much. Al Pacino's in your ear giving that pep talk, right?
Yeah.
Like, so, so when you're there and it's like, wow, like this is, like, what were you thinking? Like, oh my gosh, like I obviously I'm going to win, but it's okay if I finish second. Like there's going to be no, buyer's remorse. Like I'm not going to try and come back, next year or the year after that.
Oh man. That's a good question too, man. It was never I will say it was never I'm going to win. And it was never it's okay if I get second. It was, I am probably not going to win, but I really need to throw well to win. And if I get second, it's going to be I'm not going to be satisfied, but I'm not coming back next year. So I think I kind of came to a point when I turned pro in 2007. I told my wife, I said, hey, look, I just want to do this for 5 years. I'm going to get thrown. I'm just going to get paid to throw for 5 years. She said, okay, I'll give you 5 years. Well, 10 years later, I was still throwing.
Right.
And I had really backed down. When I first turned pro, I was going everywhere I could, right? So 18 weekends a year, not counting all the throwing I was doing, the thousands of throws I was doing, and in practice. And then by the time I was in 2017, pretty much most of 15, 16, 17, I did USAs, I did Worlds, and about 3 of the big USA competitions, and that was it. Now, I still trained my butt off. I was still practicing every weekend, every week, every weekend, and throwing a ton. I just wasn't doing the travel for my family. And so I think, honestly, man, when I came down in 2017, it was hard. It was emotional. I'll never forget Celtic Classic 2017, USA's, at the end of the year. It's the last competition of the year. And I didn't throw that well that weekend. I finished 3rd. And I knew it was my final weekend. I knew it was it. And we came down to the caber, the last throw. All the competitors went out there and grabbed it and walked it to me and stood it up to me. Like gave me a hug, like on my last one, dude.
Right.
And I came barreling down the field. And Celtic Classic always has a couple thousand people watching, which as a thrower, they never get that.
Right.
And so I flipped it, turned to 12, and I left my shoes on the field, right? That's the big thing for Highland Games. You leave your shoes on the field as you walk off. And how emotional that was for me, man. And I think about it, like, dude, it was just throwing.
Right.
But it wasn't just throwing. It's never been just throwing for me. It's if it wasn't for throwing, I never would have gotten this job with Sorinex that I love. I never would have met the number of people I have. I wouldn't be sitting here talking with you, I wouldn't be doing all these cool things and having all these opportunities. And like you said, traveling the world. And it was never just throwing. But what I'm very thankful for is that it's always been something I do. It's not defined me. And I think that's where we see a lot of people in strength sports struggle with depression and suicide, is because it's cool when you're the big, strong guy, whether that's powerlifting or strongman or Highland Games or throwing. You're big and you throw far. You do great things. But someday you're not going to be the strongest guy. Someday you're not going to be that. And what do you do then? And so that's why I think we see a lot of these guys with suicide and depression. And so it's always been something I do, never define me who I am. My relation with Jesus Christ is what defines me as a person. That's who I am. It's just the fact that he let me throw stuff for a while. And it was awesome. I'm a dad. I'm a husband. I have all these other things. And so that's my big encouragement too to people is let sports, Let strength be something you do. Don't let it define you, or else it's going to let you down every single time.
Right. And especially like, with today, like we're the same age. Like I never thought we'd be, experiencing something like this, like with
Yeah.
this like whole Corona stuff. And I was talking to Adrian Blewett Wilson the other day about it, and I was like, Adrian, like, what do you do now? Like, how is it so much different? And she's like, oh my gosh, like we don't know. Like, it's so difficult to train, like not knowing like what's going to happen, next about it. So like for you, like I say this tongue in cheek, right? So like we'll never see you out there again, even maybe like a demonstration, or hey kid, this is how you throw the caber, like anything like that.
No.
No.
I would love to. I'd love to announce. I'd love to field announce. I would
Sure.
love to, maybe judge or something like that.
Mhm.
And I want to. I want the sport to grow. I'd love for it to grow, but I won't. I won't be out there, man. I think. Yeah. I just. I have had my fill.
Sure. Sure.
I and it's funny you said, like, you asked the question earlier, like, how does it ever get boring? And it's never
Right.
gotten boring, but it's changed through the years.
Hmm.
When you're an amateur, that was all I thought about. That's all I did
Right.
was check the board and where's my ranking? Where can I go?
Right.
Where can I throw? And I got to get done with work so I can go throw.
Right.
And then by the time I was towards my end, it's like I hate to say it, man, because I love throwing, but it becomes a job, more
Right.
more of a job. I
Hmm.
still loved it. I still wanted to do it. And you can watch the video of me throwing and bawling my eyes out like a baby after I got done throwing.
Right.
It kept the classic and I'm waving to the crowd and stuff because it meant that much to me. But no, I'm good. I'm enjoying retired
Well,
retired life.
well, I think probably your competitors are enjoying that you're retired also. But
No.
no, I don't know. I mean, like, but the stuff that you're doing now, like Sorinex, like, I love the stuff. I got a whole bunch of, Sorinex equipment in my garage, and I'm very thankful for that. But like, not to end like on a silly note, but like these videos that you make with like, I just, like did somebody like put that in your ear like, hey Dan, like you should bring back these like real men. Like I remember watching the commercials when I was a kid, and I showed my wife this morning. I'm like, like we mentioned, I was like, this is who I'm going to be talking to. She's like, I remember those commercials when I was a kid too, but it's like, like they're
I know.
hysterical. Like I can watch them over and over and over and over again. Like where, like you just sit around one day and your son's like, hey dad, like we should do like funny videos or something, like, or like the throwing coach or the running like
Yeah.
where'd you get that stuff from?
Man, that's a good question. I just think I started doing it because that's just my personality.
Right.
I'm just a goofy, stupid guy. I'm not a well-read man. I'm not a smart man. And so I live on puns
Mhm.
and being silly, right? That
Right.
is maybe it's part of having 5 kids, but I
Right.
just like being silly. And so I think there's so much to make fun of in our strength communities
Right.
and throwing communities
Right.
that I just I just wanted to highlight some of that. So I appreciate that you enjoy, man. I
Oh, I
love
love it.
making them.
Mhm.
And now I will say I hurt some feelings doing them too. I have people reach out and say that they don't appreciate my mockery of the industry or
Sure.
uh, people, but and I kind of struggled with that at first. Sometimes I was like, man, I'm not trying to make fun of anybody.
Right.
It's just fun, I'm just
Mhm.
trying to create some light to it. And,
Right.
and I always tell them, I was like, look, man, you may be offended. And I'm very sorry, but you should go see my throwing videos. I'm not making fun of you. I make fun of throwers the most,
Right.
So,
That's right.
so no, I don't know, man. I was just enjoy it and have fun
Mhm.
and just start throwing videos together, I
I
guess.
mean, this the last one that you just put out, like the Craigslist, like who, like, is that? Because I always look on Craigslist for lifting equipment, like bumper plates and things, and I saw your video and I'm just like, oh man, like I wonder that's how these transactions go, like behind behind the building at the high school or something like that. Like, hey man, come here if you want to check out these 25K bumpers I got or whatever, But
Yeah. Yeah, no, I that one was I'm with you. I loved the Real Men of Genius
right, the real man
commercials.
of genius,
And if
yeah,
you go on YouTube, somebody's compiled an hour of them,
sure.
and they're awesome to listen
Mhm.
to. And I would
Mhm.
listen to those to get inspiration
Right.
for that clip. But yeah, man, I just think, and that's part of it. I was one of the things I always talk about is one of the pillars of my household with my boys is to have joy. And within that is, I think, to have joy is you've got to, number one, you've got to be self-deprecating. You've got to make the mundane, the fun things. And number three, you got to be bold and take risks. And part of me making videos is I want to be self-deprecating. I make fun of myself. I make fun of things I do, make fun of things that my industry and throwers do, down to just the little things. If we highlight the little things in life, we can make them fun. They don't have to be mundane. And lastly, to be bold and take risks. There's videos, man, that I will make this video and I'll edit it and I'll just like, dude, this is going to be awesome. Everyone's going to love this video, and I'll post it and I'll just wait. And I'm like, oh, this is great. And it just completely bombs. Right. And you just never know. And there's times I'm like, wow, that was a bomb. That was a really stupid video. And I'll post another one and I'm like, well, that wouldn't take me very long. It's not very funny, but I'll post it. And then everybody loves it. So
no, I definitely can relate. No, I can definitely relate to the see, one of the ones that I think is a hidden gem is the strength coaches at the conferences. Like, I'm that guy, like, hey, come over, let's grab these t-shirts, or let's, we'll meet you at the, the Golden Corral or whatever after the fact. But no, I can definitely relate. No, they're good stuff. But Dan, I don't want to take up too much more of your time. I appreciate, spending the time to like share and like kind of pick your brain about, work, life, and, how, what it was like to throw fire.
And I appreciate it, buddy. It's always good to chat and talk throws, especially, man. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to do it.
No, thanks, Dan. Take care.
All right.